All right. Again, we start off with something you don't know what we're talking about exactly, but something hurt a lot. Anyway, welcome to Making the Rounds
Yay!
with Emily Rand and Kelsey Moser. We definitely had some LCK production. We'll get into that in a sec. The LCK level production. But the first thing we want to talk about before anything else, just to get it out of the way, because we know a
Yeah.
lot of you people care about it, is best of threes. And see, I'm just in strong. No banter, no nothing. Emily, hit me with your best of threes take.
People do not actually like to watch League of Legends. And by that I mean starting off, I don't know if that's like a lukewarm take or an actual hot take. Okay, so here's my thing, right? Like
North
I
Americans don't
think
like watching League of Legends, I feel. But continue.
yeah, exactly. Actually, I should not say people. I should just say NA as a region. Um because I think the best of 3 argument has been reinvigorated as of late, I think because we have this massive break in LCS, which is very bleh, and not having stage games, like having talk to players, it just really sucks for them. And then on top of that, the uh I guess slimming it down to 8 teams, I do think, has caused people to really take a look at a best of 1 double round robin with 8 teams is so few games that people are like, "Why are we not playing more stage games? Like, why are we doing all of this prep and practice and all this stuff for a really, really small amount of games?" And then Travis released a video because he is very anti best of. I think for a lot of because of what happened in the past. But also I think the one thing, because I disagree with him, I think he already knows that I'm a best of enjoyer. The big thing that he does bring up though is production costs because and it's not even talent, it's like literally to turn on the studio is just a very expensive thing to do, even if you had like no one casting it, right? Like cuz you need people to operate the lights and you need sound and you need people to be like operating the tech behind the actual game and like all this other stuff. So if you extend the amount of days, it is expensive. I think I would like best ofs. I think a lot of where my take from like NA fans don't like watching League of Legends is that like it is kind of weird to me. Not necessarily weird, I guess, because like we've already talked about how kind of a grassroots attention to the game just really, really faltered. And it seemed like the way they treated the game of League of Legends in North America was that that initial popularity push in like 2011, 2012 from it being the new hotness was just going to continue automatically with like no outreach. And so like a lot of stuff was stymied and it I don't think is part of the at least the US cultural lexicon outside of League of Legends equals toxic people. So which is not a great springboard, right? To start talking about it. So I think like when you look at other sports in North America, you do have people who are just watching the game for the sake of watching the game, even if it's like, for example, me growing up, I would go to really bad Red Sox games and only the bad ones because those are the only ones I could get tickets for. Um, and that's where like the experience would come in of watching baseball because I like watching baseball because I don't know, I'm weird. But I think like a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
agreed. You have to be a very special person to enjoy
yeah,
baseball. But continue.
maybe I'm like undercutting my own argument here actually. So I'll wrap this up quick. I do think though there is not the same kind of like people do not in North America have an attachment to League of Legends as a game. And if they do have an attachment to League of Legends as a game, it's actually a lot through either North American players who've already retired, so they don't have a connection to just watching any random league game, or through other pros in other regions, right? Like, I would assume at this point that a lot of people who watch League of Legends in North America are maybe not fans of NA players. They're fans of players in other regions, and they just watch the VODs or highlights. So yeah, it makes me sad because like I do wish to some extent that League was something that people just got in and enjoyed watching, because that would help a lot in terms of this best of 3 conversation, because that is the crux of the argument for me, is that it would be better for players to play more stage games. It would be more interesting to me to see more stage games, someone who just genuinely likes watching League of Legends, again, because I'm fucking weird, I guess. But I do think, especially in North America, there is an argument that people would probably just not watch. So we'll see. I would like best ofs though, still.
I think the most interesting thing to me though is that the data that we have is basically on it is from the double stream
Mhm.
BO3, everyone's doing BO3 kind of era, which was at this point several years ago. So for me, that's the most interesting thing, because there is a lot of insistence that people do not enjoy BO3 as much as they theoretically think they do. And to me, on paper, that makes sense, right? Because there's a lot of things that people claim to like League of Legends analysis and all of these things that they claim that they like, but viewership numbers state that it's actually a pretty small proportion of the audience that actually do enjoy those things. So I'm curious if there's any way to acquire updated information on the success of the BO3 format as a viewership tool compared to without actually running BO3s. And maybe one is you compare NACL data, but that ends up being really weird because the formats have changed and there's so many variables. So it's really difficult to make a determination on that one. I will say part of the reason why I'm personally joining LCS more this split is because it feels like there's less of it. And it's like definitely a psychological thing where it's like, yes, LCS is on. It happens so infrequently. And then you go into the day and it's over the span of what feels like 2-3 hours because the game's so fast and there's so few breaks. And I think it makes people, I think that more than anything is making people revisit the BO3 conversation, is just because it is so little time that the broadcast is actually running. But yeah, the logistical cost is definitely an issue. And I think it's definitely one of those things where LPL has become this thing where every single series is 3 games. Pretty guaranteed. It's very rare that there's a 2-0. So if you're in that section, if you can't go with consistent scheduling, I think BO2 is a happy medium, but there are so many people who would rather have BO1 than BO2. So it's definitely where it feels like we're almost in a stalemate where there's no definitive statistical evidence to support that BO3 is a good idea, other than fans saying BO3 would be a good idea because there's not enough league, right? Because the broadcast is short. So it's I think it's more symptomatic in my opinion. Obviously, I also like best of series, but I think it's more the demand for BO3 is more symptomatic of the show days being so short and of there being so little LCS.
Yeah, I also think I think the ultimate solution is if we do have 8 teams in the summer as well. Just you could theoretically just do a best of 3 single round robin as opposed to a best of 1 double round robin. And then obviously, I guess the pushback on that would be the meta changes and teams change and all this other stuff. But I mean, and obviously you can't really compare because it's 17 teams to 8, but like the LPL is only a single basically every team just plays each other once. But yeah, I think like that could be a test if they wanted to do it. I literally have no inside information on this, guys. I know nothing. But if I was to run a like best of 3 test and look at trying it out for summer, that might be a that might be a thing that I would do. Is like keep it at the same time on weekends, do best of threes, but have it be a single round robin and see how that goes and see if there really is the viewership to support that. Because obviously, some weeks you will have, and again, like then you run into scheduling issues where like teams might not be playing for a while. But yeah, that would keep the studio costs relatively the same because you'd still be doing 2 days, but then you'd schedule it so that it is a single round robin of best of threes. And that could be a test that they could use as well. And then like that would obviously be, I think, tricky to extrapolate data from as well because it would be so small of a sample size. But then you also would have some sort of idea of how many people would be willing to tune in to a match between a BO3 match between two less popular teams, as opposed to, probably more people are showing up for something like C9 versus FlyQuest, right? So yeah, I don't know. That could be a solution that I've also seen floated around.
Yeah, I think the other thing for me is just every time we do one of these things, I want to try to statistically model things. And speaking of weird people, anyway, chat did have a few comments. Unsurprisingly, our chat is very pro best of because they're watching Extra League of Legends. They're watching Extra League of Legends side content, so it's a little bit of a confirmation bias. But one question we do have is, would it be hard for teams from Rain Yorha? Would it be hard for teams to do multiple BO1s versus multiple teams per day and have 2 round robins per split, or like multiple round robins per split, basically? So the idea would be add an extra round robin as opposed to making it BO3. Would that be something that would be more logistically feasible?
That would depend on teams. Because I assume you're talking about playing more.
Yeah, then you would play more
games per day.
Yeah.
I think that would be another interesting test. I think then the question would be, you would have to ask teams as to whether they would want to, because like generally, teams do not like to wait around the studio for very long. So that then it would be like, would you be able to get an agreement from teams to, play a best of one, hang out, presumably do a review of that game, of what you could / prep for the next team that you're going to face later on in the day. So that would be a lot more of a team question than an us question to me. I mean, you've been on a team, so you might be able to answer this better than me, actually, because I think like something like that would fall to the opinions of teams as to whether they want to wait in a sort of like cool down, like stasis before their next game, for that amount of time.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those. The biggest problem with being at the LCS studio from the team perspective is if you don't have PCs available for your players, they become very jittery. And obviously there are PCs available in the back room, but you then have to bring your peripherals, and your org has to pay for a third set of peripherals. And I mean, in many cases a 4 set, because you'll have a home set, you'll have an office set, and you'll have a set, 2 sets that Riot has to own. So it'd have to be like a 5th set actually to have to take, or you just take the office ones, which players never want to unplug their stuff from. This all sounds like incredibly lazy whining, because it is. I'm not saying it's not, but it's definitely one of those things that's like the low attention spans, which we've talked about before. Players don't want to be there just kind of oinking. So as a team, you kind of need to make sure that there's something there. I think it's fine. I think that, again, at the end of the day, it's an entertainment product. And as long as you're balancing the schedule such that one team doesn't have like a disproportionate amount of days where they're playing an extra game, and the schedule has to be balanced properly, right? So I think that that's like the only concern. And I think that that's very feasible, right? You just have to spend some more time on the scheduling. So Yeah, I think it's fine, like ultimately at the end of the day, and you just end up putting more burden on the teams to set the expectation with the players and to not like deal and to just be like, this is a change, everyone has to do it. No more whining. It's cool.
All right.
Another person suggested part online offline. This is something that I thought about. It's like where you have some games that are offline, some games, and you play from the office, right? So maybe you go home, play from the office, and then that way the schedule also keeps going fast. I think this was another logistical possibility that people were discussing when the idea of less break time existed, which like have some teams at the studio, have some teams setting up at home. So I think that that's maybe something that's already been a consideration. Obviously, everyone prefers to have all the games played at the studio. So
yeah, I know. I don't. So I don't know how much that was considered. I only know that talking to teams and players, they always preferred being at the studio. Like they were really, especially because we had for a while some really strict COVID rules that didn't allow for false positives a few times. Um, I know specifically, I think it happened to Golden Guardians like 3 separate times where they had a false positive and they had to play from home despite the fact that no one was actually sick. And they did end up getting, I know at least in one case, they ended up getting a not just the rapid test, but like the actual legit test saying like their player doesn't have COVID and they still couldn't go back into the studio. So my guess would be that teams would just reject that outright because there's still a massive difference in playing on the stage as opposed to playing from home. And also one thing that I do want to kind of shout out in a way is the audience. The studio audience for weekends has been awesome. And that experience, I hope, like from my perspective in the casting booth and also doing interviews and like all this other stuff, interacting with the audience is so much better now the crowd is like full. And I'm sure it's a better experience for audience members that the crowd is full. And so I think that's another thing you would kind of run into more with people probably not being satisfied if they're going to the studio and their team like happens to be playing from home that day. So that would also be a hiccup in that.
Yeah, I think we've
exhausted that
to an extent.
About this way
yeah, because
we what I thought.
Yeah, we talked about BO3 like a few episodes ago, so I think at this point we've kind of made a stance. I do think we did have like an interesting discussion with chat about ways to run a test as to see if like viewership people actually do want more games. I guess what my biggest hold off on that is I get really tired of the format changing every split. I actually do think that that also hurts the product, so that would be my one reservation on that. But we will move on to the next topic. I did want to ask you your take because this seemed very, and I did ask around a bit about the logistics and planning of it. This seemed very random, but we had the day of NACL games where you had Kobe and Captain Flowers co-streaming the NACL games. It was Saturday. On the LCS stream, and it was very like co-streamery vibe. They had the 2 webcams. A lot of the stream was actually them just trying to figure out the logistics of audio tech, so not unlike our show. Basically, they just stole our show concept, entire one. What is that? But
come on, guys. Only one show had audio issues.
The only thing we have going for us, guys. So I guess my question is like, how did you feel about it? Because it seemed like it was very last minute, like out of the blue.
Hilariously, I had no idea it was happening until one of the Discords I follow was like, oh, did you like, not did you know, but they just started talking about the fact that they were co-streaming. And I was like, what? So that was my entire perspective on it. Like when it was happening, I was like, I had no idea that this was going to be a thing. I think I would assume that we were kind of hoping that LCS teams would do some sort of like additional show matches. Like I think last week we talked about the FlyQuest Best of the West show matches that were really, really fun. Like that entire day was just very fun. And I liked the way that they used chat and co-streamers and kind of like the general ecosystem. Like I said, I kind of compared it to it had similar 2014 OGN All Stars vibes, which I really liked. Those are very good vibes to have. So yeah, I would assume that we were kind of hoping that something else would happen. So I had no idea that they were going to be co-streaming it until literally I think it was halfway into the first series that I was watching, and I was like, "Oh, I did not even know this was happening." Which is also maybe because I just don't pay enough attention to social media. I have no idea. I don't know if they even announced it like officially, because I didn't end up seeing anything anytime I looked at it.
Yeah, I think it was like, so basically I asked a few people about it, and my understanding is it was a decision made by Mark, kind of to do something, right? Effectively, and it was made pretty last minute. And obviously there were a lot of production errors with pastry time and Camcom having to like troubleshoot it and just throw it on, which to anyone who streams seems silly, but sometimes shit is randomly weird. Like, for example, my mic is just randomly way more sensitive than it has been since I've gotten it today. Who knows? So whatever. But they had the thing, and then they announced it like as it was starting. And so we ended up in a situation where I believe the LCS viewership all day, I was kind of checking back and forth, and I don't have like the strict numbers in front of me, was actually lower than the NACL channel's viewership all day. You would assume that the idea is to bring more eyes to NACL because you have Kobe Flowers co-streaming, but it was like consistently like 1/4 of the NACL viewership, I would say. Like it was 1/2 to 1/4, I think was the highest I saw it at. There may have been a time when it got higher, but the LCS channel viewership was consistently lower than the NACL channel viewership, and I think a lot of that has to do with, if you're an NACL fan, like you're gonna watch the NACL channel, and then if you're not, if you're an LCS fan and you don't care that much about NACL, you'll click off when it's not LCS, and that's it. The ones who are remaining are kind of staying for Kobe Flowers, right? So that's kind of like my analysis of it. So my biggest question was, there were several alternatives that I could think of that could happen. One was put Kobe and Flowers as guests on the NACL show and have the LCS channel host the NACL channel. That would make sense, because that's what they ended up doing on Sunday. Is just they had the LCS channel host the NACL channel, and then like obviously the other elements would be, bring an NACL caster or someone to add more context, because if it's very last minute and they don't necessarily know what's going on with the games, that would probably be helpful. And then have like a group of 3 co-streamers sort of do it. So these were sort of the alternatives that I thought of just watching it. So it seemed to me it was very spur of the moment, last minute. I liked that they tried something, but also thought that it needed a little bit more thought behind it. So I was just very curious what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sad that it wasn't, because again, I like hopefully Kobe and Flowers don't watch this show. I don't think they do, actually. But I didn't turn on the co-stream because a regular NACL viewer, just put it on the LCS Challengers stream, and kind of left it on like passively all day. That was also the Maryville FlyQuest day, right? As the final match. Yeah. So I mean, that was a match that I'd been looking forward to for a really long time, and kind of had built up within the NACL like split. And I do think for something like that, you could have like, if this had been, if they realized like midweek, oh, we're not going to have a show match, teams aren't doing much this weekend, or they want to give players time off or whatever happened, you like publicize the shit out of that if you're doing a co-stream of it, because those are the two best teams in NACL. They have really interesting storylines, and it would be a day of matches, specifically with that match as the last one, that you would kind of want to like pimp out as much as possible. I can't think of a better way to say it, but sorry, my brain is gone. I've been sick for the past 2 days. But yeah, like I think I'm glad that they did it, but kind of to your point, like I think there was such a better opportunity, especially with that FlyQuest Challengers Maryville match as like the headliner. I saw the NACL guys promoting it. Like they did the super heavyweight SmackDown thing, and that's always really fun. Yeah. It was great. So yeah, like I know the Challengers broadcast was promoting it, but if you were going to have LCS as like a partner in this, that's something you just want to blow up as much as possible and like really lean into that kind of thing. So that's a missed opportunity for me.
So Pacemaker95 said this, and I was fully focused on my own stream at the time, so I actually didn't check the LCS channel before MU Fly, and they said that the co-stream actually turned off before MU Fly and sent all of the viewers to the NACL channel. So
okay,
I guess that one's even weirder. That is even stranger to me, but I guess maybe they wanted to like build up the hype for challengers in general for the first two matches, or maybe they realized it wasn't doing what they wanted it to, and they just went and hosted the NACL channel. I'm not sure exactly what the thought process was, but it would be interesting to talk to Mark, because my understanding was it was very much his brainchild, and ask him about it. So yeah, there's that. I think we'll definitely see, because I think there's definitely something there. I'm not sure what it is, and it's probably not this in its format. My biggest fear is what will happen is LCS will see the lack of viewership that their channel got in having their talent co-stream the LCS, and use that as reasoning to say, okay, it's not worth it to invest LCS resources into covering challengers, which would be a shame, because I know that's already kind of a conversation topic, right? In the background, it's like, well, if the LCS is doing poorly, can we afford using LCS resources to cover challengers, right? Things like this. So I guess we'll see what comes of it, but that's definitely the biggest fear that arises from it for me. So yeah, like Kosak's saying, I didn't even know there was a co-stream. So like it's pretty much like no build up, no advertisement, literally just, by the way, surprise, we're going live on the LCS channel with Kobe and Flowers. Have a good one. So yeah, very interesting. We'll see if I don't mind like the scuffedness of some like casual vibes, etc. But for me, again, I think there were missed opportunities to promote some of the NACL on air talent, and include them. And then two, also just having like a little bit more prep time or some other events to do with it, which probably, to your point, LCS relying on LCS teams to do anything more than they're required at minimum is, especially when it comes to marketing and media, is definitely a hope and a dream. Anyway, so
yeah, again, I don't know, but that would be my assumption, right? Because like FlyQuest did put together a really good event the week before, so shout out to them.
It was very fun. All right. So we have we'll do this, and then we'll transition to this last kind of like industry topic, and then we'll transition to talking about LCK, LPL for a bit, because, that was basically the games that were available this week. But the main thing that was very interesting to me from an industry level was Hex from OpTic Gaming. If you people are familiar with COD, like Call of Duty. Basically is suing Activision Blizzard for antitrust reasons, basically because Activision Blizzard started the COD League and owned the COD League and bought out MLG, basically any competing leagues, third-party events, tournaments, to run the COD League. There are a lot of other objections, like, for example, the salary cap that they implemented.
Yep.
They said creates like undue trade restraints on their ability to trade players, things like that. Obviously, there's a huge cost investment into being part of the COD League. There have been, you probably know more about this than I do because you covered it. There have been so many problems with the COD League being a functional product historically, but there's no alternative to the COD League, right? So that's the big argument. And the way that this impacts League of Legends is obviously LCS kind of did LCS, like League of Legends in general, kind of did a thing where they bought out all the third-party tournament operators, owned exclusive rights on running the leagues, and basically if they want, they'll contract it out to you or not, right? That's kind of like it. They have a sole monopoly on deciding who runs this. So basically the implications of this lawsuit could, in theory, impact the way that the League of Legends ecosystem functions as well, because it would ultimately say that holding an IP license or an intellectual property license means that you do not have a monopoly on whether or not the tournaments, like you are then also required to license tournaments externally, right? So that would be the main controversy for it.
Yeah, stuff like this really fascinates me. If people want an actual giant deep dive into it, I know Last Free Nation did like a giant thing with Harris Peskin, I believe, to talk about like more of the nitty gritty of the law stuff. But essentially, an overview, and the thing that I'm looking at the most is at what they're actually trying to allege, which is a violation of Section 2 of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is essentially deals with if an end result of something is anti-competitive by nature. So the Section 2 actually reads, every person who shall monopolize or attempt to monopolize or combine or conspire with any other persons or persons to monopolize part of trade, commerce, among the several states or with foreign nations shall be deemed guilty of a misdemeanor. That's kind of what they're looking at. This has like, if taken to like its ultimate end, has massive implications for like IP law in general, because the main like, not problem, but the biggest difference between traditional sports and what we call esports, and the reason why like a lot of these one-to-one comparisons were like doomed to fail from the beginning is that, and we brought this up, I think, when we talked about the LCK teams letter a little bit, where like in a traditional sports league, in a traditional franchise league, the way that it is supposed to work, or the way that's designed to work, is like the team owners are the league on one side, and the players are a union on the other side, and they enter like active bargaining between the two parties. And that in and of itself is supposed to keep the league like the stuff that Scump is alleging, right? Which ties into the salary cap that they actually did settle previously in a different lawsuit for Call of Duty and Overwatch League, right? So that lawsuit was actually settled, which is kind of Scump's in this lawsuit, is basically saying like, well, you already settled this. This has actively affected my ability to make more money because we've already deemed that the salary cap that you imposed on the CDL, on the OWL, was an unlawful thing. So the main thing is like, how much does the game publisher have the right to do this because they own the copyright and IP of the game itself? And so, again, if taken to this like full, like logical conclusion, has massive implications for like IP law, this lawsuit's probably not going to get there. Just as a general like thing, it's probably not. But like that's the major sticking point, right? Is like Activision is just like, well, we own the rights to the game, ergo it is not a monopoly because like we have the copyright for the game itself, and that is their kind of argument against saying that this is this Hex alleging that this is a monopoly. It's really, really super interesting to me. I don't know how interesting it is to other people, but it is really fascinating to me if you look at all of the problems that we've already had with franchising models with League of Legends that have come from an inability to I mean, and again, we've covered this, so I won't go super into it, but like an inability to create enough revenue to rev share between the owners, so the owners feel like they are getting what they paid for to be a part of the franchise league. Because like ultimately, the idea of having a franchise from an owner's perspective is that you are buying in, but the revenue that you are taking from it, from the league itself, it guarantees you a constant spot. And then usually the majority of the revenue sharing that's being spread among teams is essentially from broadcast rights, which we do not have for League of Legends or anything really. It's definitely not the same as like having even having an exclusive partnership with a streaming company, which the CDL did for a while. They had one with YouTube. OWL and CDL were both on YouTube exclusively. Even that is not making nearly enough money, like licensing your like broadcast rights to, you know, ESPN or ABC, or they're the same company, CBS or Fox or whoever, whatever like US broadcasting company that a traditional sport in the US is licensing their broadcast rights to. And that's been a major sticking point for bringing in revenue, because a lot of these teams paid a lot of money to be in these franchises and they haven't seen like any sort of monetary return on investment. So it's really interesting. I'll be watching it closely. Stuff like this really fascinates me as someone who's just kind of tangentially interested in basic law and also comes from traditional sports. I don't know if anyone has any questions about it. I think I vaguely covered how it could cover League of Legends, though, because essentially, like, if they decide that Activision Blizzard has to license their IP because holding it is an unfair monopoly, that would open up a ton of implications for Riot withholding or like essentially deciding who gets to hold third-party tournaments, if anyone, for League of Legends and other esports as well, like Valorant, other esports they own as well, like Valorant.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, for the actual legal implications and everything that's happening, I think that's something that I'll probably be trying to talk to more informed people about. For me, I tried to do a lot of research on my own. I'm not a lawyer, but as far as I could tell, there is precedent to indicate that in obviously like non-esports cases, IP holders don't actually. There is actually precedent to indicate that IP holders doesn't exclude you from antitrust laws. There is precedent to indicate that. Not specifically, I forgot the case name because I'm a scatterbrain and not a lawyer, but there is precedent for that, to my understanding. So that's very interesting. I think, again, like to Chad's point, it will probably just be one of those things that settles privately. And it won't actually have huge, massive implications on the entire industry, but the question itself does, because for me, I've always very, very much thought that it was a problem that, like, you have these huge companies saying this is our IP, so we have a monopoly to license the entire league, and to control the licenses for every league, because I feel like, yeah, obviously there were so many successful events, I think, in the past in League, just to use League as an example. Like IPL 5 is a big one. There were MLGs. There were like so many fun tournaments in the circuit format. Question is, how well would they have monetized, right, over the course of time in comparatively? You know, the idea behind the LCS was to create a more reliable income source for pros. So I think to an extent it has done that, but to the cost of the league being profitable at all. So I think that's definitely something that I would be curious about, because I got into watching League esports during that time, right? The time of all of the Wild West tournaments. IPL 5 is still probably my favorite League of Legends tournament of all time. Maybe one day I will get very bored and potentially drunk and just like VOD review IPL 5. But yeah, I think that's just one of those things for me that I'd be very curious to see those things. And I think we lost a bit, like, you could foresee the franchising era. Many people did. Not everyone. There were a lot of people who were very pro franchising on Twitter, etc., and thought it would actually equal monetization and development, etc. But I think that at this point, in retrospect, it's definitely one of those things where it's like, maybe it's a grass is always greener thing, but it would be great to see more of those tournament formats, more competition, see what, like, something like an MLG or something like an OGN. I remember when OGN lost the rights to LCK, what is now LCK, right? When OGN lost the rights, that was a very big thing, right? That was massive. And their monetization models, etc. So I think very experienced tournament organizers that have run tournaments in other esports, like, kind of losing them, I think, was potentially an issue. I know some of those people actually got hired by Riot, but who knows? So for me, I kind of am interested. Well, I won't say excited, because I don't think it will pan out into anything actually meaningful, but interested in the implications of this lawsuit, and definitely want to stay updated on it as we continue to watch it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the big part to watch out for that's interesting for me, because if they settle this again, a lot of other and again, the Last Free Nation guys do a giant video on this, and they also cover this in more detail. But the most interesting thing is, in the, like, first part of the nature of complaint is Scump's actual complaint, right? Because it has a lot to do with the previous settlement that was actually deemed unlawful. So basically it reads, the Department of Justice recently concluded that with respect to the professional Call of Duty market, Activision engaged in a per se violations of Section 1 of the Sherman Antitrust Act that were intended to and did inflict economic injury on professional Call of Duty players, such as the plaintiff, Seth Abner. So part of the lawsuit that Scump, who is Seth Abner, who, like, by the way, if you don't know who he is, he's literally the most famous, most popular Call of Duty pro, I think, ever to exist. His co-streams regularly, because he's now retired, but his co-streams regularly get more viewership than the CDL itself. Because the previous lawsuit, the Department of Justice did deem that the, like, unannounced salary cap was unlawful, that's kind of an interesting in for other legal implications to be opened up when you're looking at player salaries. So that's also something like that specifically, just because there already is a case that they had to settle previously, is something that like a specific part of the full lawsuit that I'm keeping a close eye on.
Yep. So we've talked, as we usually do. We're always thinking like, oh, it's gonna be 10 minutes on these industry-wide topics, and then we end up waffling a lot more on those than anything else that we talk about. No, it's all good. I do it too. I think, though, I have done polls on Spotify, which I know is just an insane, like, not specified pool at all, but there were split polls saying that people are interested in us talking about industry things and more gameplay, and that was, like, pretty evenly split, to be honest. So there we go. We did want to get to the 7-hour LCK pause. I think I'll let you kind of take this one, because I haven't watched the catch-up games yet, so I'll kind of let you take this one.
So yeah, I don't know if people want spoilers from the catch-up game or they want like I'll give a basic rundown of it because there are some interesting things at play here, specifically that the LCK themselves did announce that the issues that were incurred during the DRX DK match were suspected DDoS attack. Um, so they actually announced this in I'm reading from the Twitter post they did in both English and Korean. When they were but they were announcing the remake of Bro versus KDF. Um, Following yesterday's issues, a pre-recorded Bro versus KDF match will be broadcasted today at 7:30 p.m. KST. We would like to explain the reason for broadcasting a pre-recorded match without prior notice. After investigation, yesterday's issues are expected to be the result of a DDoS attack. In order to perform full checks on Lowell Park so the league can proceed stably moving forward, as well as to prevent similar issues from occurring in today's match, we decided to hold the match online with each team competing from their accommodations without prior notice to the fans. And then they go into why this was rescheduled with an attempt to try to keep to the schedule. They wanted to proceed as close to the rulebook as possible, et cetera, et cetera. I think the bigger thing, obviously, because this match lasted 7 hours, approximately from like 3 p.m. KST till about like 10 p.m. KST, to play 3 total games. The DDoS attacks, which the biggest breakdown of this is actually from Cadrill's subreddit. But basically, there is a post where I know where someone goes into detail, and the first incident, one of the first instances of this occurring was actually, if you watch LCK content, I've brought up a bunch of content they do that I really like. One of them is this kind of like old retirement home pros versus challenger team thing that they've been doing. And so you had Team Reaper versus Team Cuvee, and that was actually one of the first incidents during a kind of similar Korean streaming tournament. And then there's been a recurring problem with a bunch of basically high profile, like pro players, high profile streamers, and just constant DDoS attacks that have caused ping surges up to like 500. So again, just as we had the disclaimer of like, I am not a lawyer, I am also not a tech person, but from what I understand, for a DDoS attack like this to happen, it would essentially mean that the internal network IP has somehow been like for Lowell Park and for LCK specifically, which only a few, I say a few, but like essentially the people who would know it are the people who work on the broadcast theoretically, has been somehow leaked out. Or there's also a rumor that I don't know how substantial it is, but that there is a bug in the Lowell client that allows you to essentially uncover IP addresses of games, and there were like Discord messages that Korean fans or people investigating this found that where people were leaking the IP addresses that they had said that they got through the client bug, to sell them to people so that they could essentially DDoS players. So again, I do not know how correct, especially that latter part of the information is. But it has been a problem that has been persisting recently in high elo solo queue in South Korea. And to see it affect a professional game is really disheartening. And so hopefully they can figure out a solution, because like I said, I was actually a little bit surprised that they came and made the official announcement that it had been a DDoS attack publicly. But I guess if you're that certain about it, you can. It's just, I guess, a balance of whether you'd want to admit that and potentially open yourself up to having more people try to attack or not. I don't know. It's really sad to me. I always feel for, again, like we didn't talk about the LEC finals going down with that much with the co-streamers. Like K-Droll, I think, got like an insane boost off that because their stream stayed on, but the LEC main stream went down for a bit. Whenever that happens, I always just think of like being on the other side of it and being the people who are casting the game or trying to put it together and not knowing what's happening. And it's just a really shit situation to be in. I feel bad for the players who had to wait through 7 hours of trying to play the game. And like also some of the pauses are just like the game, I assume, reaches ping that is like absolutely unplayable. But like in certain scenarios, it's just like, you guys are gonna win anyway. Let's just like it reminds me of you know what I thought of? Do you remember that? I think it was a Demacia Cup where it was so fucking bad.
That is still the most tragic.
Yeah, they had like they told like one ref told Dade, who's on Masters 3 at the time, to like just push the minions so the game would end, and then they awarded it to EDG because that ref didn't actually know what they were talking. I don't know. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. And ping spikes were super bad, and people couldn't even load into the game.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites because like the venue also shut down. They moved to a net cafe, right? Because they couldn't get the ping to work. They couldn't get the matches to work, so they fucked over Dade one because the ref told him to push to win because he was the only one who could actually move in the game, and they needed to exit the game, and for some reason they could not just exit the game. And then after that, so then they said, oh well, Dade performed an illegal action by moving during the pause or whatever, and therefore EDG win. And then they had the issue where they tried to move to a net cafe because the internet wasn't functional at the venue, and then the players were playing at the net cafe, and like mid-match the net cafe closed, and so they just had to reschedule the match full on. It's still like the most shit show thing I've ever witnessed live. So when people talk about like pauses and terrible things happening, I always think about that tournament.
Yeah, it brought me back. But like anyway, the situation obviously sucks. DK won. They survived. They survived, and they were able to ultimately take the victory. I kind of had assumed that DK would win, and then they played the other match offline, which was Brion's first win.
Woo!
They beat Kwangdong 2-1. It was a pretty entertaining series. If people want to go back and watch, I think, you know, with Renekton coming back, Lord Morgan is going to, you know, he's going to take over.
I mean, speaking of Brion, clearly they're behind the attacks.
Oh don't even joke about that. They've been through. I will say this is probably with all of the, I would say, let's just say, interesting decisions that the LCK has made over the past like couple years, when mostly related to COVID and online play. Brion has been the unfairly kind of loser in a lot of these scenarios. So I feel like this is the first time where it's actually could have helped them. But yeah, congrats to them on their first win. I hope that the LCK can figure out exactly what happened and how to circumvent the attacks for this coming week. Because obviously, especially since they announced it, that's something that more ambitious people can iterate on if they want to try. So yeah, I just hope it doesn't affect this week's matches.
Yeah, I think I was trying to look into this, and I think also it happened in the Valorant games, the Valorant Pacific games. So it's just
I saw that they had insane pauses, but I didn't make the connection.
So there's definitely I don't know what exactly is happening, but yeah, it's definitely kind of messed up that yeah, Quiet Lighter says it was the first day delayed for 6 hours. So yeah, so I think there's definitely something going on with DDOSing because it's always been like, for those who are uninformed, like Korean solo queue is always one like heavily DDoSed, heavily gambled on. Like Faker, I think everyone said, "Oh my god, Faker loved the experience playing in NA solo queue." I think this was years and years ago, but it's like Faker's matches are literally unplayable sometimes in Korean solo queue because of DDoS and because of betters and target enters and things like this. So of course Faker would say NA solo queue is better. Like, you can actually play the game, guys. So yeah, I think that's like definitely the fact that it's now extending to pro matches is very tragic, and I'm not sure what the solution is, again, because we're not IT people.
Yeah.
It's like, if it's happening potentially at like different venues, if it's happening to multiple esports, then it's more than just like a weird internal leak. There has to be, I don't know exactly what is the cause, right? It's kind of insane.
Yeah, it sucks, and I feel for all of the tech people and the broadcast and stuff like that, right? Because that's, you could tell that at least the English cast is getting very loopy.
Yeah,
at the end of it.
I mean, on the plus side, we got insane content of players asleep in their chairs, which is always a fan favorite, you know. Anyway,
gotta get that power nap in.
Since people asked for more fashion topics, and someone was asking me if it's worth to buy this bag, I believe I linked it to you in chat.
Did. It's a Gucci fanny pack for those that are unaware and want a
yeah, I'm gonna put it on.
description.
I'm gonna put it on the screen real quick. But
it is a Gucci fanny pack that I cannot find. Okay,
it's right there.
GG rubber effect leather. Okay, I'm trying to figure out like what the actual, because again, like a lot of the like when people were asking me about the Pikachu jacket, I was like, I can't see the garment, so I can't see
the material or
like the quality of the actual like seams and material and stuff like that. I again, something like this, if it is worth it to you to buy this, that's cool. It looks like it's pretty well constructed. For bags specifically, even more so than clothing, I think my personal opinion is like, you go big or you go home. And like, not for me, because my bag I bought, it's I think $200, and I beat the shit out of it until like I have to get a new one, and I always get the same one. I just kind of iterate on it like every 10 years or so. So again, not for me, but like, I feel like with bags specifically, since they're already an accessory, you go big or you go home, right? Like, you go full imp Tom Brown dog purse.
That was fantastic. I forgot about that.
Or you just get something that is like normal and serviceable, like I do, that carries your laptop bag and can withstand like a bunch of wear and tear. And you don't care that like 50 billion other people have the same bag. Which is where I'm at, right? Like, I'm like, okay, I pay this much money, I get a fuck ton of use out of this bag. I run it into the ground because I carry my laptop everywhere, and like I use it as my work bag as well. So yeah, like I think my opinion on bags in particular varies because I feel like if you're going to be paying that much for a bag, you should just go big with something insane as
There you
opposed to
go.
getting something more utilitarian.
It was just
That's my like terrible take, I guess, on it.
It was just very funny to me because I forget which viewer it was, but it was during an LPL co-stream. Someone just dropped it in chat and said, "Kelsey, I need you to tell me if I should buy this." And I just opened it, and it was a Gucci fanny pack. And when you think of fanny packs, you think of like 50-year-old dads on vacations to Florida trying to like rifle through their fanny pack to find like the map on a hike, right? That's what you think about with fanny packs.
It's literally my dad growing up.
Very,
like, actually my dad.
It's very focused on utilitarian utility, excuse, not utilitarianism. That would be a whole other.
That'd be a different thing, yeah.
That would be a different thing. But it's very focused on utility. And that Gucci has one is just so extra and very entertaining to me. So I just literally, I burst out laughing. I obviously have no fashion opinions. I wear flannel every day. So, but it was very funny.
It does look well made. I'd have to see like the actual seams and stuff, but from what I can see in the pictures, it looks like it wouldn't fall apart. So that's a plus.
So that's our fashion content break.
But yeah, go big or go home if it's bags. Go full Tom Brown dog purse. I don't even know how much that thing costs. Probably like $20,000. I have no idea.
I don't know if this is still the case.
Don't spend $20,000 on dog pay. You should save that shit for a house in this economy.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most upvote commented on our YouTube channel was that they would listen to an Emily Rand fashion podcast. So
nice.
For the last episode, unironically. So, we'll throw in some random fashion questions here and there for the sake of breaking up the monotony. So perfect transition into the gameplay section, right? Which we often make this shorter than anything else. Let's talk about. So someone in Twitch chat wanted you to talk about DK and their problems, but not mention aiming. So that's
like builds or
just
because they just
I don't know the reasoning. Like, I think they think aiming is a problem
like,
or
overly the problem. I mean, I think it's difficult. I mean, I think he's the exact same player he was last year. So with all the positives and negatives of that, he's had some really weird builds. I know in the I'm pointing to my TV because I was reviewing it, which makes no sense. The DK DRX series, he had the what they were calling on broadcast, I believe, the Twisted Flution, which is essentially a Twisted Fate build on Lucian, because he went like Static Shiv first, and then I think RFC. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of sad that DK were team initially at the start of the split, that I was like, oh, Showmaker's back. We have a new jungler that we are promoting who is really well regarded in terms of his performance in challengers. I still think that Lucid has been has made the transition pretty well. I think he's showcased in certain games just like good team fighting, especially in the beginning of the split, and then also just an understanding with some of his lanes, how to set up, help them set up, or how to respond to like what they're doing, and that has kind of evolved. So I've been happy to see that, even though like I don't think he is setting the world on fire or anything. I still think a lot of people are looking specifically at Showmaker, as am I, as kind of the player who really has to do well for the team to succeed. So that's kind of where I'm at with D plus Kia right now. Like, I think they're good enough to beat up on the bottom teams, and I want to say they've actually been pretty consistent outside of the Guangdong loss in terms of, you know, being like demonstrably better than the bottom half or so of the LCK in terms of like map play or Showmaker just like absolutely popping off and bringing in fun and unique things like the tank Azir that has now taken over. I believe Showmaker was the first to like trot that out in pro play, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I think right now this team to me is a little too much live or die by Showmaker to be able to break into the upper part of the LCK. However, they play KT this week, I believe. And yeah, they do.
Oh, so they'll win. So they'll win.
So yeah, that's an auto win. And they play Bro, which obviously, guys, it's going to be an issue because Bro are back. No, but like I think DK are a pretty easy team to understand. Which is essentially right now they basically need Showmaker to do well in order to win. And if that doesn't happen, they have a significantly tougher time winning the game because he is kind of the main point of attack for the team at large.
So they
I do still like Lucid though. I'll just throw that out there. Like I think he's
good actually.
Pretty well, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him like continue to develop because I do like what I've seen from him thus far as well.
Yeah, he's literally the greatest jungler in the league. I think that was your take, remember?
Yeah. Oh yeah, back in like a week. I was like Lucid dumpster peanut, and then
yeah, exactly. But arguably he did dumpster peanut. Arguably. Arguably. Anyway, so I think the main thing for me at this point is going back, like for DK, the on the tank Azir topic, people need to remember that this build is niche and you should not build it on every Azir. And in my issue is it's literally almost a symptom of DK's problems and the draft being bad. Because if you have to rely on tank Azir as your only engage, you're probably fucked up your draft. 1, 2, like tank Azir at a certain point because you're on your 2-3 item spike. If you're building like Frozen Heart second, typically Azir will spike on 2 items and do a lot of damage at that timing. So you're now in a point where you're potentially like in a mid-game hole and you're severely delaying your ability to do damage. So you have to overly rely on like your ADC or your top laner, whatever. So you have to compositionally factor all those things in. I think, unfortunately, I had to witness it last night in a Thunder Talk game. Of course, a Thunder Talk game in like a pretty weird situation. I think their draft was very winnable, but they did severely lack damage. And at a certain point, they just killed 1xN, the ADC every game, and there was nothing that could be done. And of course, that was also the 50,000 damage Cassante game. So the less we talk about it, the better. But yeah, I think for me, a lot of their builds are working specifically for them because of the constraints, and a lot of the things that they have that are working consistently for them are not necessarily going to work for other teams. They're like a perfect example of a team that you can watch, and it's very unique gameplay, and it's very fun, and it's very different to see like a mid laner kind of 1v9 with a bunch of rookies. So I think that's, well, not really rookies, but you know what I mean. Like it's definitely one of those things. So I think they're a unique style of play, and they're fun to watch for that reason. But if you're mindlessly copying some of the stuff they do, then it makes League of Legends worse. And that's what I've got.
I think to that point, when they step outside of that comfort zone and try to, and obviously this is a really long time ago, but I'm using it because the draft that they copied was almost like an exact copy, or it was an exact copy outside of, I believe, the Showmaker played LeBlanc and Bulldog played Talia. But like they did the draft that they essentially lost to Kwangdong, they adapted it for themselves for HLE and like visibly did not know or have a good understanding of how to play that draft out, down to the fact that they didn't even do the double support item in bot lane, which was a choice and we covered it at the time. But like, I think it's a really good microcosm of like, they have their kind of set way that they do play that works for them. But unfortunately, every time they do try to branch out and try something that is really good or has worked against them well, they don't have the same innate understanding of how to trot out those compositions.
Yeah. So, okay. That is the DK topic. Hooray. I wanted to talk a bit about TES, which will lead into a broader conversation about LPL contending with LCK teams, because right now that's like the very topical thing, which is LPL shit this split. Because the biggest motivation for this conversation is that it feels like every week Twitter analysts have a different favorite LPL team. And they're like, yeah, this is the best team because they're undefeated against shitter teams. They're clearly the best team. And then they lose or drop games to teams like LGD or IG or FPX most recently, because TES was the most recent favorite. And then people kind of like pivoted back to JDG. And then JDG lost the game last night.
Dropped the game to WE.
WE. I actually thought WE were going to win that series, like going into it, because I have not been convinced by JDG. So there's been a lot of that. So that's why, like, I kind of wanted to talk about, is there anything redeemable or is there like good moments from teams like TES? And this is a sequence from the RNG game. So we'll start with that, and then we'll talk about the wider implications here.
Let me go into stream.
So unfortunately, I'm using the QQ platform because I couldn't find a YouTube VOD.
Rip.
And I didn't want to just use my co-stream again, so here we go. We're about...
I'm getting served ads because I just...
Oh, because you wanted the Twitch.
2, 1. This is scintillating audio content. Okay, I'm good.
So, like, 1645, this was the famous, like, the reason why I'm going to be that nerd and say, oh, don't look at 369 completely outplaying RNG. Watch the minimap. Because if you watch the minimap, the important thing to note is that Jackie Love just recalled. You have LP playing for RNG, and RNG is like pushing out the wave all the way and staying on map here. So they're sufficiently staying on map. They're staying in the sequence. And off of the rotation, like not matching Jackie Love's base, they chose to make this play top with Ming, right? So they're effectively making a play on the Aatrox. Like, they're in a somewhat favorable position. I kind of like their draft here. I think it's pretty good. It's not like there are problems with it, but I think the Sivir works into most of the champs. So I think that's like a decent setup here. But okay, so the important thing to note is because we don't do that base, right? Oh my god, why? This is why I hate this player. Because we don't do that base when we stay on the map, we're now owed a base for RNG, right? So this is a big issue here. And Varus is going to come out. They also have Rift Herald. This play doesn't go well. So what needs to happen is you need to both catch the next mid waves, and you need to get a base for Sivir on this sequence. The fact that like Sivir is pushing up all the way to get to be hitting tower when she should not be hitting tower is a major issue. So now she has to base here because Tian also collapsed on her. She's low HP and there's no one to catch the mid wave. Cream also just like kills her under tower because all of this sequence. So now we're in a position where TS basically off of that one play and off of having like a better back timer end up just completely crushing the mid game and taking advantage of the like lack of good effectively bases from RNG themselves. And then when you watch the rest of this game, like after this replay, I'm gonna push us forward because I know, yay, 369 so good, guys, woo. Okay, now we're in a situation where we're back on map. Sivir's catching wave high, but we don't convert the pressure from Sivir catching wave high into basically protecting this Orianna so that she can catch the wave. So now like Orianna has to catch this wave on the side very low. We're instead using our timer to farm jungle with jungle and AD farming the same goddamn camp, right? Like why? And now because we can't use the Sivir rotation to support Orianna pushing out all the way. Effectively, we now also don't have like an Orianna timer for the next mid wave. And he's gonna just hit tower here when. So unfortunately, we can't see the mini map because of the replay. But,
Boo.
but basically now what we're seeing is TS is getting another window, right? So the question is, why am I showing this clip, chat? Why am I showing this? The answer is basically TS are yes, they're playing the map better than RNG, but a lot of the times they're playing teams that literally just don't even know what the fuck they're doing, right? So the only time we're going to see situations where these teams falter is when they're actually playing against a team that has somewhat decent macro, or a team that is like abusing windows or actually playing correctly. And a lot of these wins are kind of done off of cheeses. So there is a universe where Ming's rotation works and they kill 369, right? In that universe, then we have a window. Ming walks back mid. You're able to get a good reset for Sivir, or you're able to catch the wave so Sivir doesn't have to base. And then we control the map. We then use our next rotation after bases to help Orianna catch top wave. We push top wave out all the way. And then Sivir is catching wave low. Breathe is like very, very ahead on the map trying to catch the bot wave. And then the map is played out like way better. So because a lot of times we're relying on these like cheese niche scenarios where we can maybe get a side lane pick, we're in a situation where like TS basically are just steamrolling or running over whoever. So it's like a lot of times the games function off of whether this play works or not necessarily good map setups. So I think that's kind of like, for me, the biggest problem with the way that a lot of LPL games go so far, and why a lot of them seem so flippy or so like unreliable in terms of prediction. But that's like my cue up to the topic of, can LPL do anything about LCK teams?
Yeah, I think with TES specifically, I think obviously a lot of people are going to look at the mistake from the game 3 of the FPX series and be like, oh my gosh, like this team has been doing well until they had like one brain off moment. And you pulled those. I was looking at, interestingly enough, their series against LNG, which, if I recall correctly, was also the game that really broke the LNG fan base, who started flaming BSYY and telling him to leave. But like the main thing,
everyone hates BSYY. It's chill. It's normal.
Yeah. Off of one thing that I found really interesting from that series specifically, when I was going through like the early game, was the attention that they gave to making sure that Mako was going to go up for either to cover mid while they were going to be looking at first grub take, or to help out with first grub take after like his first reset, which is really interesting to me, only because one of the weird things about this TES team that we were talking about going in is obviously bringing Cream up, having 369, who's a top laner who really appreciates resources, and then also having Jackie Love and Mako, who are very like laning focused, like 2v2 kind of players a lot of the time. Looked like it could be a disaster potentially, like resource wise. And so I found it interesting that Mako was going to cover so early, mainly because a lot of Mako's career, I think he might not necessarily want to take those windows, especially in a matchup like with one of them. They were Kalista. They have a Kalista lane, so they really just want to dumpster that like super, super hard. But once again, in the first game, Weiwei essentially does not hit his combo on Brand, and it just opens up for a sequence where they end up taking 2 of the grubs. They also end up getting first Drake. Tien is able to get first blood on topside, and then Cream, who's Hui, gets an early kill onto Weiwei as well from that grub fight. So like off of like a few mistakes, TES really capitalize and like spread their influence, and then the bot lane actually does take over. I believe Jackie Love ends up getting like 4 or 5 plates at least. They end up getting first Drake. They're able to essentially set up for second Drake so that if LNG fight, which they do, they don't win because they're not in a very advantageous position to contest second Drake. But they do anyway. So like a lot of, and then in game 2, Mako also goes
but they
mid
do
off of
anyway.
reset while Tien is getting first grub take. That was really interesting to me, again, only because of like Mako's history and the fact that he is prioritizing these kind of really early roam timers to make sure that they end up, if not getting that objective, at least contesting for it and like setting up for it, and leaving Jackie Love on his own. But a lot of their success in these moments, even when it is like set up pretty well, often comes from opponents making a mistake or fighting when they shouldn't, or like in the case of the Weiwei's brand, just missing a combo that he could have hit. How that ties into like LCK, I think what you're seeing in LCK is more of it kind of boils down to your opinion on, is it better to have like 1 or 2 super dominant teams that are significantly ahead? And in that case, it's T1 and Gen G. With Hanwha Life ramping up, like obviously they kicked the shit out of KT, and Nongshim this past week. And then this week
they beat
have
Nongshim. They're so good, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say they have DRX and Fox this week, which are 2 matches that they should easily win as well. So they're gonna have a really strong record coming out of it. T1 have Fox and Bro, and Gen G have Kwangdong and KT, which are 2 matches that they should win. But like I think another thing at play is that the top teams in LCK, which I think I would put above the top teams in the LPL right now, based on like their map play, are also, in my opinion, significantly better than the rest of the LCK. So the LCK is like very stratified, whereas the LPL, like you said, and I've also seen some commentary on this. I think it was Molecule who was talking after the IG game of like, oh yeah, it seems like past the top teams, a lot of teams just win on like vibes, and drafts that they're comfortable with. So I don't think it's I don't think it's like a super large discrepancy, but if I was to do a insert vomiting noises global power rankings.
Yay! Okay, thank you for giving me a topic
LPL
next week,
team,
you know?
God, no. You know how I was like, for those of you that don't know, I was like throwing up. I was like really sick, and so I'll just do it on camera next time. I won't call it off on Monday, you know? Like I'll just bring the sickness.
That's the same thing as doing power
rankings make me ill.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I think I would give the edge to Gen G and T1 in terms of like their map play and their setups, and understanding of side lane pressure and understanding of like back timers a little bit better. But I also think you are seeing a situation where you really do have to watch the games to discern like, okay, if all these teams are kind of beating up on each other, taking a game here and there, like what is leading to that in the LPL. I also think right now, somewhat last year, even with the JDG super team and the BLG, like they had a good MSI, guys. I was so surprised that they did.
Emily Rand is a
back,
known LPL doubter, so
yeah, this is true. If you go back though and look at like people's faith in BLG going into that tournament, they were just a very volatile team. And the fact that they had so much success was a bit surprising. The thing I'm leading up to here is essentially that I think this year and maybe next year, there's going to be a slight trough until we have players continuing to like matriculate up. Like for example, I think Milky Way, who has been turned into the Milkman on your stream, like is a good player who was promoted from LDL, is performing really well individually. Cream now on TES kind of made his name on an OMG team along with Shanji. And they both moved on to like presumably better teams, right? Teams that are doing really well right now. TES, FPX series aside. So I think it's really good to see those signs of life, given how I actually do think now and potentially next year and last year as well, we were seeing a little bit of the effect of the gaming law that was introduced in China, in terms of how it affects the native Chinese player base and the way that they do move up to LPL. Because previously, I think you would scout and start training those players like super, super young, get them in as soon as possible. And that is just, I guess, a feeling I have. I don't really have anything to like support that.
yeah.
And I think they'll come out of it okay because, like I said, you do have players who are moving their way up. But it is interesting to look at the LPL now and see how like spread out a lot of the top talent is, like a lot of the top LPL talent, and how like mixed a lot of even these top rosters are with like players who are moving up to better orgs, a lot of younger players, and a lot of like LPL mainstays kind of spread across 4 or 5 teams.
Well, a lot of that is the salary cap.
I think
too.
another thing that's happening is that as well.
Yeah, a lot of that is the salary cap too. Like the BLG roster, like the BLG super team from a couple years ago, that was going to have like a different top jungle, for example, but the salary price would be too high for all those players to be on the same team. So you're like, I think TS is probably the closest thing we have to something like that. This split with Jackie Love, Mako, 369, right, and then. So I think that there's definitely an angle there, like Cream being, I guess most people would say Cream TN are like the ones that maybe bring the cost down, but also think those are very good players. So that's like kind of the closest thing we have to it. I think for me, the biggest thing that I think happens is people are, in LPL, you're way more likely to get that atrocious play, like the completely unredeemable atrocious play, like at TS trading the game for Baron pull, right? And then FPX just walking in, and that's ends up being the situation that that people point to on Twitter is like, oh, these teams are so bad, or JDG constantly pulling Baron, which I actually think if they fix their turn, that's not even the worst thing, right? Like if they fix their decision making between turn, etc. I'm a big advocate for basically pulling Baron as early as you can and repeatedly doing it, because I think the terrain changes make it so easy to set up a good turn angle. It's just like they aren't executing the turns well. There's I don't have like JDG that high up right now, but they for sure are a team that will just like win a decent fight at some point and win the game off of it. I did think that even though they lost a game to WE, they actually last night was maybe their best played series overall, because they're actually executing on early lane dominance, which they haven't been in regular season. So I think that's, for me, I don't see it as like LPL is just so much more shit than LCK. I see it as the mistakes that people can point to demonstrate that LPL is more shit than LCK are especially egregious. But other things that they do, like for example, I have BLG and TS as kind of still being the best teams, but they are specifically good at key points of the game. BLG is very good at early game plan still.
Mhm.
The 2v2 dive and getting killed situation aside in last night's game against TT. And then I think JDG, or not JDG, excuse me, TS's best phase is always, as with like mini Mako teams, is transition from early to mid game. In my opinion, it's
Yeah.
kind of like their best phase of the game. And the LNG series, like I can't believe people would think TES is good off of that because I've auto reviewed that on stream and my reaction was lit. Okay, well, like legit LNG just aren't doing anything. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing to glean from this game. Kind of like the RNG series where it's like there's just very clear misplays from the opponents they're against. So they aren't really being contested in terms of map play. So you'll see a lot more errors there, but that also means we get to see them like flex themselves in a lot more low probability fights. And that's where historically you see teams like that succeed from the LPL. And if the meta swings in their favor, they can still win MSI. Like it's to me, I don't think it's the end. Like oh my god, the top of LCK is so much better than LPL. I think LPL is making one-off mistakes that are particularly egregious, and we'll see what happens in playoffs because there's also the sequence. You also have to keep in mind the travel schedule and how frequently these teams are maybe prepping for a match or not prepping for a match. So for me, it's like not definitive that T1 Genji are just going to shit on everyone, but we'll see how it works because
Yeah.
LPL to most analysts always look shit. Like you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Most analysts will say LPL looks shit, and it's more about like for me, I always look more closely at how they are playing fights, how they're setting up fights. That's why I had WE as potentially winning the series because I think JDG's ability to get good flanks, unironically, is a really big problem for them against a team like WE where Stay has been performing very well self-sufficiently and is less likely to die in fights. So things like that are, I think, things that need to be analyzed more critically when looking at LPL in terms of like how they're actually executing fights as opposed to their map play right now. And then I think the last time I actually felt like an LPL team had better map play than an LCK team was 2021 RNG. That was the
Mm.
last time. 2021
That makes
spring.
sense.
That's why I
Yeah.
predicted
I
them to
think
win MSI because it's like if you have better map play than an LCK team, it's just open and shut. Otherwise, you're just gonna try to fight or take better fights, and that's about it.
yeah. I think that's a persistent issue. Not even an issue, but like just a kind of a mindset change that you have to have in order to look at LPL generally. Um but
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I still struggle with it. So,
Well, we'll see, right? We do have a question. They want us to expand on the Chinese gaming law.
oh yeah.
For players under 17, the law is they heavily restricted the amount you can play every day. I think it was like an hour, and then there was a curfew. You can't play past a certain point.
Mhm.
And then on the weekends, you're also limited to the amount of time you can play. So that also restricts the ability to recruit players below 17 to like LDL teams or no, it's 18. I can't remember exactly the age. I will look it up and post it on the screen for the publishing of the VOD. But the exact wording of the law is less important than the fact that these hours were cut very significantly by regulation. And there's, if you want us to talk about the implications to tensions, stock prices, etc., we can do that on another
Yeah.
episode. Anyway, yay. So good, fun stuff.
Yeah.
Before we go, since this has been a very long episode, I just want to quickly, LCS is back before we do our next
Mhm.
episode. So 14-4, woo, yay, fun. I just want to
Good shit.
know who you have as your biggest winner and your biggest loser from 14-4 in LCS.
I think, man, it's tough. I still weirdly, I know I said this the last time we asked about it. I do think that NRG could be a big winner if they try to return to flexing between solo laners. I don't think Jace was in a particularly bad spot already, depending on like what top you talk to, and also like itemization, I think, was the thing that hit him more than anything else, at least at the beginning of the split. So now I would really like to see an NRG that is revitalized, and Senna should still be incredibly strong, and they're a team that I think can, like, obviously bot lane dives mishaps aside, they can play Senna really, really well. And they also should have more options in flexing between mid and top for their solo laners. I also do tentatively see um nah, I'm trying to think who benefits the most from Renekton being back. Because I think Renekton will be back in a big way.
Impact, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe TL just impact blind Renekton. I'm also really curious to see if the Ari changes bring her back. In which case, I think JoJo could benefit from that. But yeah, and then it's really hard for me to separate the break itself from the patch, because I think a lot of my opinions have been on like who it doesn't benefit have been affected by also like who does the break not benefit. I'm particularly curious, even though I think I've made it abundantly clear that they're like one of, if not my favorite team to watch in LCS right now. I think 100 Thieves will probably come back down to earth a bit. Especially if teams start targeting them a bit more in draft. Because I think as good as 100 Thieves drafts have been, and as understanding of not only the current meta, but what they can put their players on, has been really, really good. I also think that their opponents haven't necessarily targeted the things that they've liked doing in draft very well. They're another team who's run a lot of really successful Senna lanes. So yeah, I fully expect teams to be targeting that harder going into these last 5 matches.
So I actually think 100 Thieves are the biggest winner of the patch.
Really?
Yes.
How?
Because Straka and Lulu are buffed. Ayla's way better at Chancers. I also think the other element of it that I really like is Black Cleaver. Very good for top lane bruisers. You can now go for like the on-hit Hullbreaker. You could do, which Hullbreaker was previously buffed.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know this. River is probably the best Zyra jungle player in LCS.
Ooh, we could see some Zyra.
And
Zyra's
bonus damage to non-epic monsters was buffed by 20.
Yeah, her clear is actually bonkers
on entry level. So I don't know if it'll get picked. It's definitely one of those that feels a little fraudulent, but yeah. So I think there's like a lot of like bruiser items feel better. Like they've been being steadily buffed. Very helpful for sniper. Generally just like small niche ways that they play, I think are benefiting a lot. I don't know about the one thing is maybe like Quid's pool might not be the greatest because you have a situation where you know, you have like I think Lulu mid might be a thing. So I don't know if that's gonna be something like Lulu mid top.
I was trying to get this out of the pros, and obviously they're not gonna say shit, but I have to ask. And they were all like, if I speak, I will die, that kind of thing. But the Lulu buffs in particular were super interesting to me because it's the biggest reversion, I guess that's how you'd say that, to the initial like gutting of lane Lulu that I've seen. since that happened, in my opinion. So that is super interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm looking. I think Lulu mid will be interesting. I think if you can play 80 mids also, like AP Smolder is better now. So, and Quid does play 80 mids, so that's the one thing that might be good for them in the mid lane role. Also, Renekton, woo! Everyone plays Renekton.
I was gonna say, I think Renekton can flex, and I think Jace can probably flex, depending on who is on your team and like who is playing it, which is why I highlighted NRG. Because I do think, again, they're best when they flex between their solo laners.
Other winners, can point out, I think the Bard nerfs don't really favor support as much, but like they're like, I don't know, AP Bard, whatever. Woo! If they did favor support, they might be good for C9. I think the like Volibear is actually, the MS is actually really nice, and the boy Armeo is like insane Volibear player, so we got that going for us. Alawi.
Is she actually viable?
I mean, you have Rich in the league, so yes, she is viable. That's the I mean, it hurts her, if anything, I think, to be honest, because you're losing 100%. So it actually, in theory, like maybe we don't see as many Alawi bans. We haven't seen that many, but it's probably bad for Dig. Acel nerfed once again. Acel is like worse than he even was. So rip Team Liquid stonks. Yeah, fun times. Oh, Jace being good. That's another one that's, I think the Jace buffs are somewhat significant. So that's another 100 Thieves thing, I think. So I actually think there's just like a lot of changes that benefit 100 Thieves. When I was looking at this, I was very surprised, but that's, for me, they're the biggest winner.
Interesting. I'm sad that Rek'Sai is not back.
I'm not. I fucking hate that champion. Anyway,
we'll end it right there. I'm not.
The Thresh is another one. Like I think the ult cooldown is somewhat significant. The Flay damage is interesting because Flay is like typically his biggest trading thing. I don't know if he's quite at the point, especially with enchanters still being buffed, where he's good against enchanters, which is like normally what you think about him, but we'll see. Also, Kai'Sa, whatever. Everyone plays Kai'Sa and thinks they're good Kai'Sa players, so no one cares. I mean, Energy, I think FBI might be the best Kai'Sa player. He's a very good Kai'Sa player.
Yeah, that could benefit them as well.
Yeah.
I mean, people were already playing Kai'Sa before,
I guess other than Berserker.
Yeah.
When is Zeri Lulu back? That's what I want to know. Sivir's getting buffed on 14.5. You know, Sivir, Zeri. I'm ready. That will favor C9 more than pretty much anything else that happens. So there you go.
I can't wait for Lane Lulu to become a thing for like 2 games. Right? To be like, no more. Not again.
It's like, well, then why did you buff it, man? Come on. Like, what are you doing? I love Lane Lulu. It's so fun. I actually think it's really broken. Like, you can go Lich Bane Lane Lulu. Holy fuck. That's so fun. Yay. Playing Lulu into Jace? Yeah. Typhus is here. Typhus is here for it, you know? Alright. Yeah, Lulu into TF. Let's go. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sad that we didn't get to see more of the TF. Ugh. Anyway.
Can we please stop playing bot lane TF? That is my last prayer into the void. Alright. I don't have anything else. This is probably our longest episode yet. And we mostly just talked about random shit with LEC and LCS not being here.
True.
So hopefully everyone enjoyed the episode. I'll try to get it edited and up on the YouTube channel tomorrow at the normal time so that there's no other disruptions in the schedule. And everyone have a good one. Holy shit. Typhus, thank you for the 10 gifted community subs. Yay. Ooh. That's straight like $10 for Emily Rand because I give her half of what I get from it. So it's about $1 each of us. Woohoo! We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Let's go.
Thank you.